Well, welcome everybody. Please do introduce yourself. We'll be introducing ourselves shortly. My name is Rachele Espiritu, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. So I will go ahead and do that now and get us started. So hello, welcome to this Friday of the CREA event. We are excited to be with you this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. And welcome to Expanding the Bench, Evaluators Partnering to Drive Change Towards Justice. We're eager to spend this next 90 minutes with you, and we will first do introductions of our team. And so I'll start. Again, my name is Rachele Espiritu. I'm the Expanding the Bench co-director. I'm also one of the founding partners of Change Matrix, which is the company that operates and leads Expanding the Bench. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I am a first-generation Filipina and have been doing evaluation work for a while, and am excited to be here to talk about a passion of mine, which is around culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. I will pass it on to my colleague, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks so much, Rachele. Good morning. I guess it is morning for everybody on the call, regardless of your time zone. So good morning, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Waetzig. I serve alongside Rachele as both the managing founding partners of Change Matrix, co-director of Expanding the Bench, and have some responsibility for field building and fundraising in this initiative, and have had such an amazing time getting to know the somewhat non-evaluators in the evaluation ecosystem. It is really a privilege to be here with you all today, and I will pass it on to Sandra.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Silva. I'm a Latina evaluator at Change Matrix, and I'm the director for the Leaders in Equitable Evaluation and Diversity program, which we will speak more about later. I'll pass it to London.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm London Losey. I'm based in Minnesota. I've been with Change Matrix for almost 4 years this month and have been project directing the ACE Evaluation Network with Expanding the Bench for almost 3. And it is a pleasure to be here with you today. Karla?
Thanks so much, London. Hello, everyone. My name is Karla Mendez, and I am the ETB project manager. I'm based out of the great state of New Jersey, and it's such a pleasure to join you today. I'll pass it to Rachele.
Great. Thank you, Karla. So I do want to acknowledge that we are part of a larger team that helps to lead and drive Expanding the Bench. In particular, I'm not sure if Susan Gunbor is on the line, but she is our new ETB director, and we're really excited to have her and want to acknowledge our team member, Cheyenne Mallison, for making our slides look so wonderful. So thank you for joining us today. We have several objectives for our time together that we wanted to share with you. First, we're hoping that you'll get to learn a bit more about Expanding the Bench and the work that we're doing around culturally responsive and equitable evaluation work. We also want to make this a very interactive session. So we're providing some space for our team to do a little bit of reflecting and responding to some of the work and the lessons that we've been learning as we have been leading Expanding the Bench for the past few years now. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear about opportunities to engage in this work to help really with our vision, which is to shift power in the evaluation ecosystem. We want this to be conversational. We're not much of the talking heads type of people, and so we will share a bit of an overview of Expanding the Bench, why we think it's important, what we do, and how we do it. And then we're going to engage in a moderated conversation that I'll lead to help share the lessons that we've learned and then find out from you a little bit about what your responses are to those lessons. We do encourage you to ask questions along the way and participate in the chat. This is how we're all going to learn. So we will pause at particular points in the session for you to do that. And if you feel comfortable, we'd love for you to unmute yourselves and to share some of your thoughts and responses to questions as well. So we're going to start off with a poll. And this is a big picture kind of poll because that's how we operate at ETB. We see ourselves as players in this larger ecosystem. And so we want to hear from you around what does the evaluation ecosystem need in order to expand the bench and support diverse evaluators partnering to drive change towards justice. And so in order to do that, we are going to ask you to visit Poll Everywhere, which maybe you've done already in the past, but you can do that by either just clicking on your browser and going to the website. I cannot move my screen now, so I'm gonna just, or you can text to the number 22333, the word Change Matrix 335. And we will get to see your responses. And if the team can let me know if they're showing up when they come in, that would be great. So again, what does the evaluation ecosystem need in order to expand the bench and support diverse evaluators? And if you have a challenge with the Poll Everywhere, feel free to put your response in the chat as well. Sometimes this program is a little glitchy. So if you have already sent in your response and it's not showing, oh, there we go. Great. So I see in the chat too, communities of practice of diverse evaluators, that we want to create an active community network, that we need more leadership opportunities for diverse evaluators, funder investment, training and peer sharing around asking and leading courageous conversations. Thank you.
Rachele, we're not seeing the poll responses on the screen, but I think you're reading them. So
I am. Darn, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it works.
It worked during our practice.
Glitchy.
Didn't this time, but thank you for sharing those ideas. Also, there's an interest in some concise brochures and dissemination materials, leadership opportunities, and allies to help share the burden. Great, thanks for sending these in. And we'll also be asking you more questions throughout the session. I think these align really nicely with some of the work that ETB is doing, and we can look forward to hearing a little bit more from you too, so that it can help drive and inform our work. I'm seeing an entire ecosystem of learning and practice from high school on, so going really early in that pathway. We've heard interest in that, and Sandra can talk a little bit about that as she leads our pathway program. Commitment from those with power to give it away. All right, thanks for sharing. Okay, well, we'll move on. And I'm sorry that didn't work. I might be able to figure that out before our next portion or next poll. But anyway, what we did want to do was, I'm seeing a lot of new faces. Would love to hear if you know a little, if you might maybe just even raise your hand either on the screen or via the icon in Zoom, if you know a little bit about ETB already. It's always helpful for us to get a sense of who's coming into the room with us and what your familiarity is with ETB. So if you've heard about it, would love to either see your hand go up or your icon go up on screen, and maybe London, you can let me know. Or if we're mostly talking to. Yeah.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 people.
Okay.
5 or 6 people, if I'm counting right, who have some familiarity, but it looks like we have a lot of new folks too.
Great. Well, excited to share with you then. This is exciting. So we're going to start off today's session by giving you kind of an overview. And so for those of you who know about ETB, bear with us. We're going to share a little bit about the purpose of expanding the bench, some of our key priorities, and the program elements. ETB is how we like to refer to the initiative. Started off with funding and started off really at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And a few years after it had been started, Change Matrix has now taken over leadership and expansion of the scope of ETB. And so for those of you who might have been introduced to it a few years ago, it's expanded quite a bit. And so we're excited to share a little bit about that information with you. So let's go on here. We like to start off with this quote from one of our participants in one of our programs. I'll read it to you. So without efforts to diversify the field, evaluators, sometimes unintentionally, perpetuate structural inequities by uplifting programming that conforms to the needs perceived by those in power rather than expressed community needs. Evaluators from diverse backgrounds strengthen evaluation practice, offering different lenses through which to identify successful processes and outcomes that address social problems. In turn, that contributes to equity in the society and service sector, social service sector. So we've kind of highlighted a few key points in this, and we feel like this is really at the heart and the essence of why we're doing this work. So we're doing this work really because some of the problems that Ebony stated in her quote earlier that really exist and have existed for a while in our ecosystem. So we know that the ecosystem doesn't include the perspectives and voices of diverse communities who have been historically excluded and oppressed. And just to point out, we do use this word ecosystem because we wanted to go broader than the field. We wanted to note that this isn't just about evaluators per se, it's about how evaluators work in our larger systems. And it's important to recognize the impact that those systems have on this kind of work. We also know that organizations and systems that support evaluation aren't consistently using what we're calling a culturally responsive and equitable evaluation approach. And we know that when we're not doing that, that there is harm to individuals, to communities, and to society. And because of this problem, we created, this problem is what informed our vision for expanding the bench. And so we worked on this vision for a while, and it's gone through a little bit of iteration, but it is that, and somebody noted this earlier around power. So it was nice to see that statement, that power is distributed equitably amongst evaluators, community members, and funders to lead change towards justice. That is what we are working towards in this initiative and as a whole. And in order to do that, what we're doing at Expanding the Bench is supporting diverse evaluators and funders of evaluation to value, practice, and promote culturally responsive and equitable evaluation ecosystem. So that's our mission. We're doing it in several different ways. And so what we did early on was work on a theory of change. And we did this in partnership with our team, along with an advisory team that is also helping to guide and inform our work. And so what you can see there on the right side is the vision that I just read off earlier. And this underlying theory that we know that when we engage all these different experiences and we have the value of equity driving our work, that we're going to benefit systems and communities. So these are our strategies on the left-hand side. We want to strengthen, diversify, and increase access to diverse evaluators. We want to also develop and promote the evolving practice of CREA. And we want to contribute thought leadership and grow this network of allies. And you'll hear a little bit more about these strategies from our team members later on. And this is what we expect to see in terms of some of the change. We want to see diverse evaluators who are practicing CREA becoming leaders in our system. And what's exciting is that we're already seeing that. And so it's nice to see, and we'll have some examples. We want to know that CREA is a best practice, that it is in the field, that people are using it, they're referencing it, they're promoting the work, and that there's increased diversity, inclusion, and equity in the system itself. So this is a theory of change that's been driving our work. This was early work that we did and feedback that we got that as Change Matrix took over Expanding the Bench, that we need to make sure we knew our space in this system. So I'm going to turn it over next to Elizabeth, who's going to talk a little bit about the term culturally responsive and equitable evaluation.
Yeah, thanks, Rachele. So Rachele mentioned earlier that Annie E. Casey Foundation started this initiative in 2014, and we adopted it, took it over, started to manage it in 2018. And one of the first things that we really felt like it was important to do is understand what it is we were talking about, the practice that we were talking about. And it was still early enough that there was culturally responsive evaluation out there. We knew that there was equitable evaluation out there, but we wanted to make sure that we were offering something that was comprehensive and inclusive and particularly meaningful for the work that we were entering into. So the definition that we wanted to use would guide our work and would also guide our conversation in the field, and the relationships that we were building in the field. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple of people whose work was really the foundation of our definition, and they are Stafford Hood, Karen Kirkhart, Rodney Hobson, Deborah Joy Perez, Contini Murray, Art Hernandez, Donna Mertens, and Geraldine Coffey. There are others, but these folks in particular, their writing, their research, their work in the field really helped us create our definition. So I want to take a moment to just read it, because I think sometimes, and so it would be helpful if you read along while I offer it out loud. And the question we're going to ask you to respond to in the chat, just so you have fair warning, is what sticks out to you? What's coming up for you? Is what sort of sticks in your mind as you hear this? So here goes. Culturally responsive and equitable evaluation requires the integration of diversity, inclusion, and equity, 3 different things, in all phases of evaluation. CREA incorporates cultural, structural, and contextual factors that include historical, social, economic, racial, ethnic, and gender factors, using a participatory process that shifts power to individuals most impacted. CREA is not just one method of evaluation. It is an approach that should be infused into all evaluation methodologies. CREA advances equity by informing strategy, program development, decision-making, policy formation, and change. It's a big definition. It's inclusive of a lot of things. So when you hear that, what comes up for you? What stands out to you? What do you hope for? And so we're getting this is great. In all phases, integration of diversity, inclusion, and equity in all phases, shifts power, shifts power, shifts power. Awesome. Yep. And the purposeful spreading of power, it's participatory. Yep. This is me reading the text because I know you all can read, but sometimes it's helpful to hear it. Another power shift, not just one method, that came up a couple of times. Infused in, it's a way of being. We often hear that. It becomes a way of being. It's not just something you do. It's who you are in the work. So infused into all evaluation methodologies, infused into you as an evaluator, infused into those who commission evaluation. Contini, shifting power to those most impacted. Shifting power and infused across all phases. So there really does seem to be a couple of themes here. People are really resonating with the shifts in power. People are resonating with the fact that it is infused in all of the different methodologies. And then a couple of people really noticed the participatory piece. So thank you for sitting with this definition for a while. You will have access to the slides. We invite you to go back to it, consider it, think about how it fits in with the work that you do.
Elizabeth, there was also a comment from Gianna that I just want to make sure.
Rachel's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to thank you, Gianna, for raising that. And it's certainly something that we'll look into. We weren't aware of that. So thank you for letting us know.
Well, and I would just add a little bit to this, that we're having conversations with some evaluators who come from tribal nations, who are come from indigenous backgrounds, and they've really encouraged us to think about culturally responsive and indigenous equitable evaluation. So really not assuming that all things fit under that bucket. So as with so many things, definitions and terminology always require reflection and potentially amendment or adaptation down the road. So we really do appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. And thank you, team, for pointing that out because I missed it. All right, so we're going to go on to some of our key priorities. You know, it's sort of tempting when you have a complex initiative to think about all of the things that you do, the programmatic elements. And we really stepped back for a moment to think about the elements of the work that would be tied to the programmatic pieces, but they were elements of the work that were important to us. And there are 3 of them that we continue to talk about and land on and that guide our programmatic elements. And so I'll just name them and then our team is going to talk about them in more detail. But we focus on the people. Who are the people doing the work? Who are the people asking for the work, benefiting from the work? So that's one. The second one is practice. How do we show up in the work? And the third one is field, that is really the entirety of the ecosystem. And how are we moving forward collectively and together? That was redundant, but collectively, I'll just say that. All right, so we're going to move on to talking about people, and I will hand it over to Sandra for that.
All right, so at Expanding the Bench, we really are intentional in terms of centering people in this work, and specifically our primary audience, which includes those evaluators that are from racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds that, you know, Rachele mentioned are viewed and becoming leaders in the ecosystem. And this really kind of connects us back to why this work is important and why it's needed, as Rachele mentioned in the problem statement. But we also know that there are other key audiences. We could not do this work without the funders and without the partners and the allies that really support our programmatic efforts and really help move this work forward.
Thank you, Sandra.
So Elizabeth shared the definition of CREA earlier, and our focus on practice ties into this definition because we believe building people's capacity to use and promote CREA should be the gold standard for how evaluation is done. And so CREA aims at doing away with evaluation narrative and practices that have unjustly harmed racially and ethnically diverse communities, and centers evaluation around these communities' interests and strengths with an emphasis on working with communities rather than to or for them. And that's something I think that really showed up in the poll when we started the session. In addition to this, ETB's efforts in the practice priority include creating a shared language and understanding of CREA. And this is something we really focused on with our recent 4-month-long CREA learning series that you can learn more about. We don't have time to go into all of that today, but we have information about it on our website, and we hope to offer it again soon. We have also worked to promote and integrate the practice of CREA into evaluation through the programmatic components of ETB that you'll hear more about shortly. And possibly even more importantly, we actively work to build and strengthen relationships among and with evaluators and funders of evaluation.
Thank you, London. And Karla will talk a little bit about our field building.
Thanks, Rachele. Yes, and to round us out, we have field building. So you heard a little bit about all that we're doing to change the evaluation field to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And at the core of this is really a deep value around knowledge sharing with others. So building and growing a network of allies that support this work is a huge part of what we do because we simply can't do it alone. And we draw this advocacy and awareness through a few different ways, which you'll see here on the screen. We hold space through our programming efforts for funders of evaluation and evaluators to engage in critical reflections and have deep discussions with one another. We also lift awareness by hosting informational sessions around what we do at ETB and the practice of CREA. And we're also constantly reaching out to new funders of evaluation and evaluators so that we can continue to grow and build a network of allies. And again, we just can't do this important work alone, which is why this field building movement centers around an effort to engage others in challenging, ways of being, changing perspectives, and ultimately shifting power dynamics.
Thank you, Sandra, London, and Karla, for providing that overview of why this work is so important and highlighting what our priorities are. So we're now going to give you a brief overview, and we're excited that there are people on the call who are new to ETV so that we can share a little bit more about actually how we do our work, how we operate. And so to do that, I'm going to pass it over now to Sandra, who's going to talk, I'll provide you an overview of the different elements. So we do have a program that Sandra referenced a little bit earlier called Leaders in Equitable Evaluation and Diversity, or our LEAD program. And this is a 2-year professional development pathway for racially and ethnically diverse evaluators to develop CREA practice. Initially, Change Matrix served as an external evaluator for this program, and that was our connection with Annie E. Casey, as Liz mentioned earlier, to then start the overall work of expanding the bench. Another big program in expanding the bench is the Advancing Culturally Responsive and Equitable Evaluation Network, or the ACE network, as we fondly call it, which is a professional network of racially and ethnically diverse evaluators who use and promote CREA practice. So we're excited, and maybe some of you, if you're not familiar with it, can look into that and join. So we'll look forward to sharing a little bit more about that with you. And then under our funding and field building efforts, this is really our campaign to increase the understanding of CREA amongst a wide variety of stakeholders to promote the network, because we know that we can't just offer these programs, they need to be used in the evaluation ecosystem. And so we do want to continue as part of that field building effort to shift the evaluation ecosystem towards using a CREA approach. So now we'll dive deeper into an explanation of these different programmatic elements. Sandra will start off with LEAD.
Sure, thank you. So as Rachele mentioned, LEAD was started by the Annie Casey Foundation, and I see that we actually are joined by Tiny Murray, who was instrumental in this program and designing and leading this program, and she was at the Annie Casey Foundation. And it was developed as this pathway program, as Rachele mentioned, for individuals that are earlier in their career, maybe individuals already working as evaluators, or those transitioning from research to evaluation and really interested in furthering their evaluation practice specific to CREA. So we have had 50 scholars that have been supported through the program so far, and we just launched the 4th cohort of scholars a few months ago. And the program entails these 3 components. The scholars complete an online curriculum in the fall. Right now, they're in the process of completing the first course on theory, and then we'll soon transition to the second course that is focused on application of CREA. Once that is finished, they'll be transitioning and matched with a practicum site. So working with a research or evaluation firm, university, or foundation to really apply some of the new skills and knowledge that they learned through their practicum, through the online curriculum. And then at the start of the program, scholars were paired with mentors, and these are individuals that are very experienced scholars in their own right, who serve as mentors throughout the program, really providing professional guidance, developing close personal relationships, and sometimes they become collaborators too in the work.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Just also want to note that this has been an offering for that has been available to the field, to early career researchers and evaluators for free. We have been offering this program through important foundation support with the opportunity to provide this professional development opportunity to the field, which has been exciting. We've already seen some amazing impacts from this program. If you have any questions about the programmatic elements as we're going along or need a little bit more detail, feel free to type those into the chat and we're happy to answer those along the way. We know we didn't have a ton of time to go into all the details, so this is high-level overview, but if there's something of interest, feel free to let us know. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I will now turn it over to London to talk about the ACE Evaluation Network.
Thanks, Rachele. So where LEAD really focuses on those early career evaluators, the ACE Evaluation Network really focuses on mid-career to advanced career evaluators. And so currently the network includes 95 members who identify as mid to advanced career evaluators from racially and ethnically diverse communities within the US and sovereign tribal nations who share that same geography. And maybe one thing to point out that we maybe really haven't focused too much on so far is when we say racially and ethnically diverse communities, we're really talking about Black and Brown communities, people of color, and folks who identify as part of Indigenous communities. So non-white alone. So one of the network's goals is to improve the presence and expertise of evaluators practicing CREA in the evaluation ecosystem. And there's a scored application required to join the network. And with this application, members are asked to describe in detail their experience with and practice of CREA. Some other goals for the network are to establish a network of professionals who practice, promote, and or teach CREA, and to shift power, as you've heard before, those power dynamics in the ecosystem, particularly those dynamics between evaluators and funders of evaluation. So while the ACE Evaluation Network has some similarities with other professional networks, I think the area it really differs is in its focus on building community. The network takes relationship building really seriously, and we try to embed this value into everything the network offers, from things like social hours to coffee breaks to communities of practice and so on. We also advocate for network members to obtain work through more equitable processes and draw attention to how some current contracting and procurement processes need to change in order to create equity. This includes things like sharing funding opportunities in advance with network members when possible, and also to really encourage some funding entities to share those opportunities exclusively with the network. ETB hosts a protected database that network members have the option to share their work experience on and to connect with one another on. And also there's opportunity for funders of evaluation and evaluation partners and other allies to gain access to the database, to be able to connect with members on that one-on-one level, to learn more about their work and to share those work opportunities. Finally, with the network, we really strive to offer professional development that aligns with network members' interests and opportunities for growth in their fields, and that is at no cost to them. None of the network opportunities, just like with LEAD, are at cost for the members. We fundraise for that. Within the past few years, we've offered communities of practice focused on business development and on CREA practice. We've also hosted monthly learning tables where members share internally with the network or to a broader audience the work that they're doing, and there's an opportunity to workshop some of that work as well sometimes. And as our budget grows, we really hope to build in more formal training opportunities for members to continue to build their evaluation knowledge and capacity.
Great, thanks, London. I'm just wondering, because we have a little time, if you might share a little bit about how one can become an ACE Evaluation Network member. And just to share briefly before you do, when we inherited the ACE Evaluation Network, there were some specifics around membership for the database, and we've expanded that a little bit at Change Matrix to include all racially and ethnically diverse evaluators who identify as African American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and African American. And so we've been excited to see that grow in this group of this network, and are really having a focus I think this year on our outreach to the Indigenous evaluators. So just wanted to point that out. And Lyndon, if you can share a little bit about how to become a member, that'd be great.
Sure. So I've just added to the chat the link for our Become a Member page on our website. Our application is actually going through a transition period right now, so it is not currently live, but we are hoping in the new year to have it become live, and we're moving to a rolling application so that people can apply at any time during the year. We will have set scoring periods probably about twice a year due to the capacity of our team. But really we want to be able to have that application process be as accessible as possible for people. So to become a member, we have a set number of criteria really focused on the membership itself, and making sure that we're really lifting up racial and ethnic diversity in this community. And so some of the criteria include being part of a racially or ethnically diverse community. And so we are not currently accepting applications from evaluators who identify solely as white, of European or European American descent. We also have a requirement that you reside in the United States or a U.S. territory or on sovereign tribal land that shares the same geography. And part of the reason for this requirement to date has been due to the funding opportunities that we're promoting and supporting are primarily U.S. based. We have seen interest in more of a global representation, and indeed many of the members of the network work globally, but we haven't expanded membership to other geographies as of yet. That may come in the future.
Great.
Earlier, I mentioned that you have to have a mid or advanced career level of evaluation experience, and with that requirement, we ask that you have 7 or more years of evaluation.
Thank you so much, Lyndon, and thank you for posting the information on the chat as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and Karla to talk about our fundraising and field building strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Rachele. Notice a little difference here. It said field building before. Now it says fundraising and field building, because we often think about those two activities in somewhat the same way, because they're sometimes the same people. And this is an interesting initiative, because we want folks that we talk to both finance or help us finance ETB, and they're the same people that we want to use the services and supports that ETB offers. So in recognition of the fact that a field that understands the importance of CREA and is seeking to partner with evaluators from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, we do work to in the field building sector to increase that understanding, to make sure people are aware of that. We also do work to make sure that folks are, when they are able, to financially support the work of expanding the bench. And it's been really gratifying to know how many philanthropic partners out there who will financially support us if they can find a pathway to do so. And we'll talk a little bit about the ways in which we engage these folks in a while, but I just wanted to point out that this is a somewhat convoluted or complex part of the work, and it involves 2 separate strategies. And I'll turn it over to Karla to talk about the goal and some of those strategies.
Thank you, Liz. A little convoluted indeed. And I'm just reflecting on that goal. And I think the main takeaway here is that we're really working hard to shift the evaluation ecosystem toward a more diverse and CREA-centered one. And we operationalize this goal by focusing heavily, again, on relationship building. I mean, I can't stress enough like what a focus this is and how important it is to build relationships in the field in order to achieve these greater missions. So for example, we highlighted here, coffee breaks are one of the main ways that we build relationships. Coffee breaks, for those of you who don't know, are these opportunities that we offer once a quarter. They are these one-to-one hour-long coffee break chats where we match evaluators from the ACE Evaluation Network to funders of evaluation to engage in informal conversations with one another and just get to know one another, which, has been hugely popular. Both the evaluators and the funders have consistently said that this is an activity that is beneficial to them, that they're getting to know more people in either side of the aisle and really building connections with one another in a meaningful way. So that has been a huge success. And we are also offering programming around CREA learning and knowledge sharing, which includes the CREA learning series. That I know some of you have engaged in that, which is exciting. But for those who don't know, we did a pilot launch of this series this year, and it really is a self-paced 3-part learning series that provides these short informational CREA-focused videos followed by some live discussion. And it was very well received, and it's something that we'll be offering again in 2022. So excited to share some news about that too in the coming year. And then the other thing I'll add is that we also engage in Elevating CREA, which is an opportunity we have to work closely with the foundation and their evaluation grantees to create a shared understanding of CREA, engage in deep reflection, and ultimately grow and change evaluator and funder practices. So that's been really exciting work to see unfold. And then I'll just pass the mic back to Liz to say a little bit more about that strategic outreach and conference presentation.
Thanks, Karla. Yeah, we're doing a lot. So let's talk a little bit about strategic outreach. I just want to, again, thank Annie E. Casey Foundation for taking us by the hand when we were first starting out, because we didn't know the fundraising world. And they really helped introduce us to folks who were interested in the work that they were doing. And they taught us a little bit about how to have these conversations with prospective funders and allies in the field. And so we're at the point now in 2021, we probably host 80 to 100 of these calls a year. It not only, though, is it a conversation about what resources do they have to allocate to our work, it's also a call about how they're using these services and supports. And some of our best ideas actually come from these calls. So, for example, one of our funders was saying, I could really use some support around understanding whether or not my procurement process is equitable. And that's one example. I mean, it's one call among many where we've been asked to provide a little bit of support in that process. And as a result, we're initiating a new way of supporting funders who are in that procurement process called Evaluation Engagement Consultation, which will be part of our portfolio of services next year. But that came from one of those funder calls. We also get on the phone with every single funder who gets on the ACE database, or at least invite them to get on the phone with us, because we want to understand their experience. We want to understand what they're looking for that they may not have found. And we hear a lot in those calls about how to refine this. Some of those folks are not just funders, they're also evaluation firms. So we consider these bigger evaluation firms who may be trying to build their capacity in CREA practice or engage evaluators from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds into their work. So there are opportunities to have to outreach in both of those ways. We also come to places like this because we find it's a really useful way of telling people about the really cool work that we're doing, how people are responding to it, what we're learning as a result, and we want to invite you in. And so CREA and AEA are natural places to be. We also work with GEO, and we work with philanthropy support organizations, not necessarily in conferences, but there are large audiences that we can present to or engage with in ways that will invite them into the work that we do. So always happy to be out there pitching all things expanding the bench. And so that's just a sampling of what that looks like.
Great.
And we've learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you, team, for providing that overview. So for the participants on the line, for you who are just learning about ETB, we hope that gives you a good picture. And if you have an interest in learning more, please do send any questions to us via the chat and do visit our website. It's actually going through a restructure right now. And so see it now, but then know it might look a little different in a month or so with some enhanced features and accessibility on there. So now we actually want to spend the majority or the rest of our time in learnings. And for this portion, we're going to be sharing some of what we've taken away. You've heard about why we need to do this work, how we're doing it, what we're doing. And we've had this opportunity to learn from that, from the relationships that we've been in, from the work that we've been doing, and the people. And so we're excited to share 3 learnings with you today. We're going to be in conversation now, and this is where I will turn off our screen so that we can see you. We invite you to be on camera too, because we want this to be an interactive dialogue amongst our team and with you. And so we have questions for you along the way as well. So let me pop up first the first learning that we'd like to share with you. Really, we've known this, and we know from the field, and you know this too, that there is an incredible interest to deepen our collective understanding and awareness of CREA. We know that has been our theme for the year for Expanding the Bench, that we have focused largely on the people, and we want to make sure we're enhancing practice. And so I'll be turning it over to each of our team members to learn a little bit about, for you to hear a little bit about what they've learned, and then we want to hear from you as well. So let me make sure I take down my slide, and I'm going to pass it off first to Sandra to share a little bit about the work that you've been doing, Sandra. You work a lot, as you mentioned earlier, with evaluators who are earlier in their career. So what are you hearing from them? What are you hearing from that experience?
Thanks, Rachele. Well, Karla and I were responsible for reviewing all the applications for the LEAD program for this most recent cohort. And I think that and we ask in the applications to really, for the scholars to indicate the why for them, like, why is this important? You know, what are you hoping to get out of this program? And I think what we saw consistently in that process is that many of them were doing the work in the field, they just wanted a deeper understanding of CREA. And it could be in terms of becoming more familiar with the actual history of CREA or the theoretical frameworks that are sort of underpinning the practices. But it's also about strengthening their ability to really increase awareness of CREA in their spaces. So an observation that we've made too is that evaluators are really working in these spaces and have to show up in many different roles. You know, you have to show up as a teacher, as a guide, as an advocate, as an implementer. And someone I think early mentioned really wanting to, or more support in leading these courageous conversations. And that is really, I feel like, more and more where evaluators are finding themselves. And so I think for all those reasons, I guess, for all those reasons, those were some of the things that we were hearing from these scholars, at least certainly with the most recent cohort.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Sandra. I think one of the values of ETB is that we get to see evaluators at different phases in their career. And so I want to turn it over next to London to share a little bit about what she has learned through implementing the ACE evaluation network, and that network being with evaluators who are a little bit further along in their career.
Yeah, I think we've found that there's an ongoing interest in CREA, in really deepening and improving CREA practice, regardless of one's CREA knowledge or skill level. But with the network in particular, when it began, the focus on CREA practice was not as prominent or strong as it is now. And so we've seen an interest among members to create spaces to discuss different elements of practice, and to really create a shared language or understanding of CREA, which was one of the impetus for why we created the CREA Learning Series. And we really engaged members in developing that content as well as other people that are associated or work with ETB. And over the past few years, besides the CREA Learning Series I mentioned earlier, we've also hosted these communities of practice where members can really come together and explore elements of CREA and other things related to their evaluation work in a space that is held specifically for evaluators of color. And that has really resonated with people because it's really that place where they can just talk about their practice and not always feel like they need to explain things. And I guess the only other thing that I would add too is that what all of this work is really doing is to really help bridge gaps in understanding. And that work we have found to be really well received.
London. So Elizabeth and Karla, you have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different people in the ecosystem. And I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the kind of conversations or learnings you've had from those conversations with funders, with other allies, as well as evaluation firms.
Yeah, thanks, Rachele. I'm going to take a pause for just 1 second, though, to go back to a couple things that London and Sandra said. I have the really great honor to work with the scholars around adaptive leadership, and the conversation that we had was about what to do when you're a CREA evaluator, but how to do it was really like a super important part of this. And how to do it is challenging when you come from a culture, when you come from a background that has not necessarily been dominant in our history. So norms about leadership, norms about practice have all grown up, have all evolved with a white dominant culture. And so what I was hearing from the evaluators, which I thought was so incredibly cool and hard, was, how do I fit myself into that, or do I challenge it? How do I show up as a CREA evaluator in a space that I didn't create, that's not mine, and I don't know that I necessarily belong to? So I just want to point out that the enormity of the work around CREA practice is internal and personal, as well as intellectual and the evolution of practice. And that's true for the funders too. It really is. I mean, it's just been an amazing opportunity to speak with folks who are really committed to equity, especially in 2020. You can imagine in the last 18 months of dialogue, the work of folks who know they have power the conversations have been around, what can I do? How can I do better? How can I do more? And it's been a really gratifying set of conversations. But in part of wanting to do more, what can I do more of? What can I do better? Is understanding CREA practice better. A question I often get in these calls is, I don't really know what it looks like. What does it really look like if I have a CREA evaluator doing CREA work in my organization? And so inviting them into these shared learning spaces. So I love that the CREA Learning Series was open to including both funders of evaluation as well as the evaluators in the same space. I know that didn't work for everybody across the board, but for the funders that I know, they were so enormously grateful to learn alongside these evaluators and learn about CREA practice in a space where they weren't negotiating a contract. They were just learning together. And that was a really cool part, I think, about the work that we were doing this year.
Thanks for sharing that. So you've heard a little bit from our team about some of the learnings around this lesson number 1, that there's this need to deepen our understanding of CREA. So I'm curious to hear from you around where you go to deepen your knowledge about CREA. What are some sources or people or courses that you go to continue your learning journey? And so we invite you to either share that in the chat or to unmute yourself and share before we go on to learning number 2. So Sylvia, thanks for ETV being a source for you for learning. We appreciate that and that thumbs up. Thank you. Other thoughts? As a team, we're also wanting to make sure we're expanding the places that we go to. We do have a newsletter that goes out monthly, and we're often highlighting different resources and events. So we are often looking for other sources of information or spaces that we can share with our network too. Any other thoughts or ideas? And while you're thinking of that, the other question that we have for you too, and thank you, Kristin, for sharing that the literature that's available in the AEA New Directions Journal is great. Yes. And we have also contributed, our team has also contributed to the AEA 365 blog series. And I think there was just another one recently that was put out that had some references to CREA resources also. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Ariel, for sharing that you're early in your career and that you are using some of the resources on ETB. So as we're in here, we're also curious to hear from you about what would be helpful for you to continue your own learning. What are some things that ETB might consider as we're going into our year of strategic planning? And I see Susan on video. I didn't see you earlier, but if you missed it at the beginning, Susan is the new ETB director. And so we'll be leading our strategic planning process, which we are super excited about. And so this is a great opportunity to hear from you around, well, what are some things that you would like to see that we might consider offering through ETB to help deepen your knowledge? So I'm seeing a couple more that Alina offered that she's learning about the JEDI program. Great program. We have definitely done outreach with them and connected to JEDI as a way to think about creating more of that pathway, like connections across the pathways. I think somebody earlier in our first chat said that we should be starting at high school, which we would love to do. Right now, we're kind of in graduate program to early professional career, but we've been in conversation with some foundations that are going into undergraduate programs, which is really exciting to see. And so we actually do have a few JEDI has been going on for a long time. And so we do actually have some mentors who were JEDI alumni, I think. Karla and Sandra, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But we do want to make some strong connections across the pathway. Min, thank you for sharing that you have biweekly reflective practice. And there was some interest earlier in being engaged as a practicum site. And I do want to say that we've also heard from our practicum sites that they go through a lot of learning as being a host to the lead scholars in their experience. So that's been really exciting to see. Great. Any other thoughts?
I'll add, I work for a funder alongside Erin, who's also on this call. We side by side on the same team, and we've been doing a lot of what other folks have been saying of kind of looking at the websites, looking at the journals. And we've had the benefit of that there's a few of us to have conversations and to talk about it and to think about it. But I think that we're at the place now where it'd be great to have someone outside of our team come in and push our thinking even further and help us think about different perspectives and different actions that we can take that we haven't thought of on our own.
Thank you for sharing that, Britta. That is something that we have been approached by another foundation to offer. And so we do have another pilot program that we've offered called Elevating CREA. We have so many E's in our names, but Elevating CREA has been an opportunity for a little bit of a smaller group structure to engage as a peer learning community and walk through some of the CREA learning series videos that Karla mentioned earlier, and engage in practice and pick a program or a project that they want to dive a little bit deeper into and work with a coach around thinking about how you integrate more CREA elements into practice and ways of being. So happy to share a little bit more about that opportunity, Britta and Erin, with you later if you're interested. Okay, so we will go on. Thank you for sharing and reflecting as well. We will go on to the second learning that we wanted to share with you. So let me just pull this one up and then I will go quickly into just sharing or not sharing my screen so we can see faces. So the second learning is that there is a strong desire to connect with colleagues, really to know that you are not alone in this work. And so I'm excited to turn it over to London to share a little bit about what she's been learning as she's been really leading a lot of these practice efforts that we have in ETB. So what stands out to you, London?
I think, Rachele, that this learning by far is probably the one learning that encapsulates the whole essence of our work with expanding the bench. It is by far the thing that we hear the most about from network members and other people who are associated with ETB, and that I mentioned earlier, around just how much they really value making connections and relationship building with one another. And this is particularly important for the evaluators of color that we support, who've reported how unique the space is, not just in terms of bringing people together with a shared interest in CREA, but bringing together people who have similar lived experiences, to whom they need not to explain where they're coming from, and with whom they can really just be in a community with. And so it's really been a pleasure and a privilege to witness that and be part of that and included in that experience. Sandra, is there anything you would add?
Well, I would definitely echo what you shared in terms of the participants for LEAD. And again, like thinking back to the conversations that Karla and I had with all of the scholars, like through the application process, they really were looking for a sense of community. So individuals shared with us that sometimes this work can feel really isolating, especially if they're the only evaluator of color in an organization, or if they feel that equity isn't really a priority or meeting resistance when they're raising equity issues. So they really sought out a space for connection with others that, like you said, have similar lived experiences, are operating in similar professional capacities, and wanting to grow in similar ways. And through our evaluation of the 3 cohorts so far of LEAD, the relationships that were nurtured through the program were really the most valuable part of the experiences. So those are the relationships across the cohort, amongst all the scholars, but also between the scholars and their mentors. And more, I feel like connections that are developing between the scholars and the practicum sites. So we know, for example, that from the last cohort that a number of the scholars have continued working with their practicum sites, like after their projects have ended. So that's I think a really nice outcome that's resulted from that.
Yeah, Sandra, I remember you were mentioning that one cohort of scholars were meeting on a Friday night or something. I think it was a Friday night. And I think to me that just speaks to the commitment and the connections that this group made. And it was just so exciting to see that they were that committed to each other.
It is true, but it was also during the pandemic, so I would imagine most of them had nowhere else to go. But that's not to minimize. It is a commitment, but they did. They were meeting on a regular basis, and I know that there were some really close personal relationships that were nurtured through those calls, and they are collaborating on articles and on books and projects. So that's that really. Again, like such a great outcome. That's a goal of the program.
Thank you, Sandra. So Elizabeth, we've talked a bit about the fact that relationships are at the heart of expanding the bench. We'd like to hear a little bit more about the relationships that you've noticed developing, you and Karla, as the main outreach people to funders and allies in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Rachele. So for those of you who are old enough to remember the Field of Dreams, there was a very key phrase that's, if you build it, they will come, right? If you build it, they will come. And that's kind of what we thought about the database. If we build the ACE database, people will come, they will get on the database, they will find evaluators on the database, they will contract with them. It's going to be awesome. What we didn't anticipate was a little bit of hesitation. They didn't come in the numbers in the speed that we thought they would. Nobody said it was a bad idea. Nobody said they didn't want to, but there was something standing in the way. We couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then the pandemic hit, and we heard from a couple folks, well, these conferences are the places where we have coffee with people. And thus was the coffee breaks were born. Oh, we can do that virtually. But so another key learning and slight surprise, but we were sort of prepared for this, was that when people build relationships in informal spaces, that thing we built becomes a lot different, becomes a lot more attractive, becomes the place to go, because they're building their confidence in the database on the relationships they have with people. And that's just been an extraordinary, I think, gift to all of us as we've been building ETB. But we've just heard time and time again, I had this great conversation, and now I've either hired that person or I've gone onto the database, and we can see an increased use in the database based on what we think are our efforts around relationships between evaluators and funders. The other thing I wanted to just say real quickly about relationships is that I think, Rachele, what you said is absolutely right. We are so excited that we've been able to create relationships with these folks who trust us, who will tell us what they think, who will tell us when we're doing a great job, will tell us when we've fallen short. And that's true for our advisory team of evaluators and funders of evaluation and scholars and partners. It's also true of those 80 to 100 phone calls are with people that we've been building relationships with. And because of that, they feel part of the community. And that has just been a key part of our work. Karla, what would you add in terms of relationships? Because my favorite one is on ETB is with with Karla here, who really helps me with all of these calls and sits on them with me.
Sure, Liz. I think I just want to echo everything our team members have said, but maybe stress that that connection with colleagues, like having somebody who is maybe in the same gradient or area of the spectrum in your understanding of CREA, like connecting with that individual or those individuals is meaningful, because not everybody is in the same place when it comes to like fully signing on and being on board with CREA is something we found through our first learning. And so having that space to like explore and be vulnerable and be honest about like what you're getting and what you're not, or, what you're seeing or what you're not, is important. And those levels of understanding, I think, are becoming increasingly clearer to us as being nuanced, and how we need to make space for that and have people feel comfortable to admit that they don't know, or be able to connect with like-minded folks in that same similar circle. So yeah, that's what's coming up for me.
Thank you, Karla and team, for sharing. So I think what you've heard, hopefully, is that we're interested in creating relationships. We're also interested in building and enhancing them and disrupting some of the normal patterns to relationships. So one of the things that we heard very early on is that often funders of evaluation tend to go to the evaluators that they know, who are in their system. And so part of the purpose of creating the ACE Evaluation Network was to open up some doors to some different people that evaluation funders may not normally go to. And so that's been an exciting process, and learning like what we need to do to help along with that. As Liz said, we can't just have a database, which feels a little bit impersonal, but there are people in there. It's a network. And so you will see that when you get into our new website, which will be highlighting more of the amazing evaluators that are in the database. So Aaron, I see your hand is up. Feel free to unmute and ask or comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick question. So I'm curious if there's anything that y'all are learning about, I guess, the geographic coverage of the folks participating in the different programs that y'all offer. So like Brita mentioned, we're a place-based foundation. And I think that a lot of our internal conversations have been around, what does like the local or like statewide landscape look like? And, who is thinking about these things outside of our team, of course. So just curious if there's, anything that y'all can share around, who's participating in these different offerings, and what that might mean for more intentional connections, I guess, in the future.
Thanks, Aaron, for that question. And as Lyndon shared earlier, the ACE Evaluation Network is a national network, and we do get questions for our requests too for very geographically focused kind of work or evaluators. So I will ask Lyndon to respond and share a little bit about the network as well as the participation.
Yeah. So Erin, when the network first began, it sat under Annie Casey that's focused on the East Coast. And so we actually have a number of network members who are based on the East Coast, particularly in Maryland, because that was where the roots were of the network. The network has slowly spread across the continental US. But there are definitely still kind of pockets of where membership exists right now, and other areas that we're really hoping to build more outreach and representation for in the network. So there's a fairly good numbers on both coasts, and we're working on building more membership in the middle. We're also really hoping to build up some membership in the US territories. We don't have any right now, and we'd really like to, and to build more membership in those sovereign tribal nations. We have a few members who identify as Indigenous, but it's really a goal of ours to make the network more inclusive and representative of Indigenous communities as well.
Karla, you may have a better sense of the participation question because you help us so much and know where people are located. Is there any theme or anything you might want to highlight in terms of where people are in terms of who's participating on things like the CREA Learning Series or even our lead scholars and practicum sites? I do feel like we have a good spread, but there's probably pockets.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Rachele. It is a pretty good, healthy spread. Definitely, if you think of like the major cities, we have at least one or two evaluators in each. Definitely East Coast, West Coast is well represented. So even more those middle states that we could use more evaluators in, and smaller, of course, cities and whatnot. So recruitment and outreach is certainly at the forefront of what we're doing here. And then the other thing I'll mention is we have seen a trend in participants insofar as colleagues from their organization join and engage in our work. That has been one of the big themes. So we'll likely see, if you are from XYZ organization, you might have like 4 other colleagues also join you from XYZ organization. And that's exciting because I think that signals that what somebody is engaging in is good enough for them to spread the word and tell other colleagues to also join. So that's something that we've seen too.
Thanks, Karla. Sylvia, I see that your hand's up.
Yes, so I just wanted to make a comment because I'm a part of the ACE network or ETB, and I have been maybe 4 years early on. And I could totally resonate, I think, with what Elizabeth was saying, is that initially, like, there was a heavy lift to get the application done. It felt like a heavy lift. Comparatively speaking, it's not. But the energy around the network really started to pick up in the last couple of years. We found potential partners through the network. Folks have reached out to us from the network. RWJF invited us to do a proposal for a contract that we ultimately won. So that side of the energy behind the network, I can say, like, it's been valuable for us as an organization that we tend to hear like, oh, we had no idea about DIR. We didn't know there was a place down there in the South. So that's been great. And from the relationship side, I think I was in a session yesterday and someone said, oh, I saw your presentation a couple months ago. Can we connect? And I was like, yes, like that's sort of what you want to have happen. And we showed up in this space together, but I think that it set, that opportunity set the stage to make more connections. And I've built some great relationships with folks where we just do group thinking and peer sharing together through our connection with the bench, ETB. So thank you. It's a great program and happy to share our own experience. It's individual membership, but we do have a lead scholar, Natalia Ibanez, joining, and we're also going to be a practicum site. So we're excited to just kind of dig in and be supportive where we can.
Oh, that's so wonderful for us to hear, Sylvia. Thank you for sharing your experience. And now, Natalia, I saw you share your video as she mentioned you. So all those interconnections are, it's this web that's being created amongst the ETB network. And we're always excited to hear about what it's been like and how we've grown and where we can continue to go into the future. So let me move us on to our lesson number 3. And again, we invite you to share your experiences and or questions as we're going along. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to examine the why, what, and how of our work. At Change Matrix, we often use Simon Sinek's model of really centering why, because that helps us ground us in our work to then think about the what we do and how we do that. And so we're constantly asking ourselves these questions. Why is this work important? What is going on in our current context, in the political scene, in our society that drives the need to be doing this work? And what are those issues that we need to be responding to? So we know we need to be nimble. We know we need to be flexible. And we saw that with the pandemic. And so that was how the CREA Learning Series emerged as well. And then we want to be constantly asking ourselves, how are we going to dismantle these systemic racism that exists within the evaluation ecosystem? What is our role as expanding the bench to do things that are helping to support the evaluators, the funders of evaluation, and evaluation firms and allies to challenge the status quo? We know we need to do things differently. So I'm going to turn it back over to Elizabeth to share a little bit about what she's been learning in her conversations and the experience on ETB.
Yeah, thanks, Rachele. And it really, in some ways, goes back to our problem statement. I mean, the things that we noticed and that other people were telling us about, that the way in which knowledge was being generated, the way in which value was being determined was only a piece of the story, and sometimes the wrong story. And when the wrong stories are told, or a piece of the story is told, people can get hurt. And so we started out with this fundamental belief that increasing the number of voices in the evaluation field was critical. And then to grow that beyond the evaluators doing the work to the environments and within which they do it, and the people that commission it. I was going to say for whom they do it, but it's really they're doing it for all of us, right? Because we all have to reflect and learn around this. So the why continues to be that knowledge building that is authentic and equitable. And we're learning and we're seeing that when evaluators who practice CREA from diverse backgrounds get into the mix, they do change things up, right? And that's sort of the confirmation that our initial problem statement and the initial things that we were doing, that we set out to do, building on Casey's work, was really powerful and important. And so we know that when CREA evaluators engage with organizations, that things change. And we saw that in a practicum host site in our last cohort, where I had a conversation with the funder, and she was like, well, we really weren't quite sure that we had the right project, or that they were really focused on sort of the technical aspects of what the evaluator would be doing. But when that relationship was created and when that work happened, what they realized was that the evaluator and the funder both had some things to learn, right? So the evaluator was applying their practice in an environment that wanted them to be there, but the foundation was learning some things about how they had done things in the past that may not be appropriate, that may not be effective, and that CREA evaluator was able to illuminate that. And their practice is different because of it, not just around that project, but in that foundation, it's different. That's why we do that work, because that power is shifted now so that the evaluator is an important voice in how we identify and gather data and work with people in the community and really get to an outcome that is of service to the people that are most impacted. So we get really excited about when those conversations happen. It reminds us of why we do this work. And I think
that,
yeah,
that's great. And one of the things I appreciated about ETB is that we're continuously learning, right? We're continuously adjusting and responding to things that we hear in the field and from the people in which we are working with. And so, Sandra, I thought it'd be good to hear a little bit about what some of the learnings have been from the LEAD program and the adjustments that have been made over the past couple of cohorts.
Well, I think for lead, in terms of the what, the program components, the curriculum, the practicum site experience, and the mentoring, that has all remained, the essential components have remained the same, but what has evolved is the how we're approaching each of those. And so we've really taken advantage and leveraged the evaluation information that we collect throughout from each cohort and all the participants. So we have feedback from the scholars, from the mentors, and the practicum sites, and that's really changed how we're approaching the how. So, for example, with the curriculum, feedback that we looked at for cohorts 1 and 2 really led to a complete revamp of the curriculum for cohort 3, because essentially scholars felt that the content that was pre-focused was really insufficient. And so we shifted from having a curriculum that had like one module that was on CREA to a curriculum that is entirely CREA focused. And the other thing that we've done is really place more emphasis on the leadership and lead. Elizabeth mentioned that she's leading some conversations around adaptive leadership. And so we've integrated content into the coursework, and we'll have sessions throughout the program to really support leadership development amongst the scholars. And then another thing that we've been doing is really being more intentional in supporting the community and relationship building. And this is feedback we received from all participants, really wanting more time with each other, more time for connection. And so in this cohort, we are really supporting more time for the mentors to meet amongst themselves, for the practicum sites, we're supporting a community there, and also for the scholars themselves. And this year we launched a professional development series that specifically for ACE and LEAD members, and that's really to help bridge connections, because that was something else we heard too, with the hopes that these LEAD scholars now will be future members of the ACE network. And then I guess the other thing that comes to mind is that we also made a shift for cohort 4 in terms of eligibility. And so in the past, scholars had to have a doctoral degree. But we know that there are many people that don't have doctoral degrees that are doing evaluation work and are doing a great job, and have really important and critical experiences and expertise that can enhance this work. And so we've opened it up. So eligibility this year to include those with not just doctoral, but master's level degrees too.
Thank you, Sandra. I think that's an important thing. I think that is a shift that hopefully others, organizations especially, and even funders of evaluation are looking at, is that to value the lived experience that evaluators bring, that we don't always need to have the credential, the common credential that people are looking for, but to really look a little bit deeper and to understand what is the lived experience that evaluators can bring to the work. So thank you for highlighting that shift. Lyndon, what would you add in terms of areas that you see ETB growing in terms from this particular lesson learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think in preparing for this presentation, there's 2 things that really came to mind for me. In some of the opportunities for growth or improvement for expanding the bench and the work that we're doing collectively in the ecosystem. So one thing is that we've really heard from evaluators, especially those who are a part of the network and working with the LEAD program, that there's a need to push for compensation that reflects their level of effort and experience. I think too often evaluators of color have been asked to volunteer their knowledge or skills for, quote, the greater good. And this has really resulted in undervaluing, both at a social and a financial level, of their contributions to the evaluation ecosystem. So there's a need and an opportunity for expanding the bench and others to advocate for evaluators to receive the compensation that they rightly deserve. And another thing that kind of ties into this learning and this opportunity for growth and improvement is something that I started to mention earlier. And that is that with our own language and practices with expanding the bench, and I think it's even something that Gina brought up in the chat earlier, that we strive to be inclusive. Well, we're trying to be inclusive and are inclusive with our work, that sometimes it's still not inclusive enough. And so we've been challenged to consider ways we can be more inclusive of Indigenous evaluators in particular, so that they too feel fully seen and heard in ETB spaces. And so we're working to improve this, and we're trying to learn and change for the better.
If I can just add something really quickly, Rachele, that kind of brought to mind too, London, kind of the connection between the learning number 2 around relationships and how it connects to this third learning, because I think that because we really value relationships, and I think that the people in our community, I think recognize that we're coming from a place of authenticity, that I think they have challenged us. And while sometimes it may be uncomfortable, I think it's important. And so I appreciate when people have raised up and said, you know, maybe you didn't exactly get this right, you know, completely right, or maybe you didn't consider this. And so it has been really useful and valuable to us, because we know that we make missteps and that we're not perfect, and we're always learning. And so I just wanted to kind of just, you know, raise that up too.
Thank you for highlighting that, Sandra. I think that we're all in this journey together, and that we won't know unless we hear. And so it's important to get that kind of feedback from the groups that we're working with. So London did put in some questions for you to consider, and we would appreciate if you want to unmute yourself and share and/or type into the chat. What are some of the supports that are not currently available in the field but should be? You know, these are things that we're interested in hearing about at ETB. What are some other opportunities to disrupt the non-CREA approaches? And we hear that often, like, how do I talk about this with a funder who maybe doesn't have even the word equity in a proposal request, or, you know, and so how do you step into that space? And interested in hearing from you around what value you see in ETB. So feel free to put any comments in the chat and/or unmute yourself.
I'm just going to go ahead and also praise the ETB team. I'm very honored to be part of the LEAD program, and I am a result of you opening up to masters too. I was very excited to see that change. And so I do see a great value to ETB and to the program. And as Sandra and many have said, just to the community of practice that is being made among scholars. I think that what is not as supported in the field yet, but it's in the works, is that connection between funders and minority evaluation firms or minority evaluators. I think that there's still a challenge there, and there's still room for improvement in general in the ecosystem. So yeah, I think that still needs a bit more work, but it's in the working.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that and sharing your experience, Natalia. I think those are those power shifts, and that shift of dismantling some of the ways in which we have normally practiced, funders, evaluators, firms, and relooking that and seeing where do we need to make some changes and shift some power. Thank you. I know we're coming up at the end of our time, so let me just share the last few slides that we had here. Which are one, make sure you contact us. Here's our contact information, team@expandingthebench.org. I know that Sandra and London, I think, shared their direct contact as well, but we do monitor this email. And somehow, did I miss the how to be engaged slide? Oh, I think we took it
No,
out.
we took that one out.
Okay, there are lots of ways to be engaged with ETV. So please, we're all here. We want to develop relationship. We'd love to hear from each and every one of you. If you have any questions or follow-up, please do reach out to us. We're eager to connect with more people and for you to share this information with your colleagues and networks as well. So thank you for joining us today. And we enjoyed the participation and the questions that you asked of us. So we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and the time in the CREA conference as well. And thank you to our CREA sponsors as well. We were very excited to be able to share some of the learnings that we've had through expanding the bench. So thank you so much for spending the day with us, or the
Thank you, everyone.
90 minutes with us. Thank you.